Okay, now we are going to talk about inscribed angles and polygons. Let's first discuss these two vocabulary words. Inscribed angle, it's an angle whose vertex is on the circle and whose sides contain chords. So those are the chords that we're talking about. So an inscribed angle has to actually touch, the vertex has to touch the circle. Remember, before our central angles, the vertices were at the center. And then the other word that we need to know is intercepted arc. So the arc that inscribed angle touches is what we call an intercepted arc. So think of it if I made this really weird pie piece. Okay, that intercepted arc is like the crust of the pie. Okay, so let's do some examples. Well, let's first formalize what we have discussed about inscribed angles. So inscribed angles, if I have one, then I know that this measure of the angle itself is going to be half of the intercepted arc right here. Okay. So for example, if I knew that this blue arc was 100 degrees, then this red arc, or this red angle rather, that angle measure would be half of that. So half of 100 would be 50 degrees. Okay, now the other thing we know about inscribed angles is that if they intercept the same arc, then they're going to be congruent. So I'm going to trace out this first inscribed angle, angle ACB. That has an intercepted arc of AB. And I'm going to trace out this other arc, I keep saying arc, that's angle ADB. Okay. So the green angle and the red angle, they both have the same intercepted arc of AB. So that means that they're congruent to each other. So let's use this to do some examples. So in this first example, they want me to find the measure of angle T. Here's angle T. Notice that angle T is an inscribed angle, and its intercepted arc, remember that's the crust, is right here at 48. So the measure of angle T is going to be equal to half of 48. So half of 48 is simply 24. So that wasn't bad. Now the measure of QR, now we're talking about an arc length. Okay, so that doesn't have an inscribed angle associated with it. However, we do have this 50-degree angle. So QRT, that is an inscribed angle. And its intercepted arc is QT. So if the angle is 50, remember 50 had to be half of this arc. So 50 is half of what number? Well, that's 100. It's like our example we just did above. So why is that helpful to me? Well, QR is the other red part. So if I look at this whole arc from R to T, that's a semicircle. We know a semicircle is 180 degrees. So I know that 100 plus my QR is going to equal 180 degrees. So that means QR, if I subtract that 100, QR is equal to 80 degrees. All right, so let's move on to this next one. It says, find the measure of arc RS. So RS is right here. That's the arc. And you see how that has the crust of this pie piece right here. All right, the 31. So 31 is half of the arc SR. So how do we figure out what SR is? Well, I'm just going to divide by the half, or in other words, multiply both sides by 2. Either way you want to think of it. So SR is simply 62. Another way to think of it is, remember the arc is always going to be bigger than that inscribed angle. So you know it has to either be a half or double. So if I'm going to find the larger piece, I need to double my number. If I'm going to find the smaller piece, I need to half my number. So SR is equal to 62 degrees. Then it asks, what is the measure of angle STR? So I'm going to trace out STR. Now that's another inscribed angle. And notice that it has the same arc as the original angle. So that means that this angle and this angle are congruent. They have the same crest. So an angle STR is also 31 degrees, just like angle U was. And then in this number 6, multiple choice problem, it wants us to find the value of x. And so we have x's in 2 spots. So I have x in this inscribed angle, and then I have x in the intercepted arc. So I have 7x minus 5, that's the angle, has to be half of the arc, 12x plus 10. So in order to solve this, we need to distribute that 1/2. That would give me 6x plus 5. I'm going to subtract the 6x. So that would give me x minus 5 equals 5. And then I'm going to add the 5 over to the other side. And that gives me x equals 10. And that's all they wanted me to find was x. So that would be answer choice D. So some more vocabulary that we need to talk about is an inscribed polygon. Inscribed means it's drawn inside of something. So an inscribed polygon means it's inside of a circle. So here's a triangle where the vertices all touch the edge of the circle. And then here's a quadrilateral where all the vertices touch the edge of the circle. So that's what we call an inscribed polygon. And then the circumscribed, remember the prefix circum means around. So it's a circle that's drawn around another shape. So this red circle is drawn around that triangle. Same thing here. This red circle over here is drawn around that quadrilateral. So here's what we know about inscribed triangles and quadrilaterals. If I have a triangle that's inscribed, and specifically I'm talking about one of the sides of the triangle is a diameter, then that means our angle here, angle B, has to be 90 degrees. And if you think about it, that makes sense with the inscribed property we were talking about before. If angle B is my inscribed angle, then the crest on that, the intercepted arc, is going to be a semicircle. So that's 180 degrees. So angle B had to be half of that 180 degrees. And half of 180 is 90. Okay, so as long as that side of the triangle is the diameter, we know that it has to be a right triangle. And the other property we know is that if we have a quadrilateral that's inscribed, then the opposite angles have to add up to be 180. So they have, for example, measure of angle D and measure of angle F have to add up to be 180, and then the measure of angle E and the measure of angle G have to add up to be 180. Now that does not mean that they're congruent. That's not what they're saying. They just mean that if you add those up, they equal 180. So let's look at these examples. So in this first one, 80 is across from X, so those are opposite angles, so those should add up to be 180. And then Y is opposite of 75, so those should add up to be 180. So let's do that. X plus 80 equals 180. So if I solve that, I should get X equals 100 degrees. And then the other equation I could write is Y plus 75 equals 180. So I subtract that and I get 105 degrees for Y. All right, let's do some more. So I like highlighting them. Let's see, 2A is opposite of this 2A, and then this 2B is opposite of the 4B. So for our equations, I have 2A plus 2A equals 180. Combine like terms, and we get 4A equals 180. Divide both sides by 4, and then we get A is equal to 45. And then my other equation, it's going to be the green ones. 2B plus 4B equals 180. So combine like terms and I get 6B. And then if I divide both sides by 6, I get B equals 30 degrees. All right, and then our last one, I'm going to have C is opposite of this angle, which is 2C minus 6. And then I have pen x is opposite of 8x. So let's do some equations. So I have C plus 2C minus 6. That is equal to 180. Combine my like terms and I get 3C minus 6 equals 180. I'm going to add 6 to the other side and get 186. And then divide by 3, and then that gives me 62. So C is equal to 62. And then my other equation is going to involve the x's. I have 8x plus 10x is equal to 180. Oh, I forgot my x. And then I have 18x is equal to 180, which means x has to be equal to 10. All right, so this last problem, we're trying to find the values of x and y. And notice we have a few things going on here. We have a quadrilateral that's inscribed. We have two triangles that are inscribed. And then we have these arc measures. So we have lots of different options we can choose. So I personally think it'd be a lot easier just to use these inscribed angles. So I'm going to trace out y for a minute. There's angle y. That's an inscribed angle. And its intercepted arc is 84. So what do we know? We know that y has to be 1/2 of that intercepted arc, which is 84. So if I do half of that, that gives me 42. So y is equal to 42 degrees. Now x is this inscribed angle. So its intercepted arc is not marked. However, we know that this is 84 and this is 84. And so that means that these two, since they're both in semicircles, so this has to be 180 minus 84. Because remember, that whole black arc is a semicircle. So if I do 180 minus 84, that gives me 96 degrees. So now I know the crust part. I know the intercepted arc of angle x. So that's going to be x is equal to 1/2 of 96, which gives me 48. So that would be answer choice. Let's see, which one is that? Answer choice E. All right, so there we go. We've talked about inscribed angles and inscribed polygons.